welcome to the Energy Out West Conference. My name is Wyatt Catron, and I'm here with the Montana Weatherization Training Center in beautiful Bozeman, Montana. Today I've got with me Jonathan Ballou. Jonathan, tell me about yourself and your organization.
Thanks for having me, Wyatt. My name is Jonathan Ballou. I am the Energy Programs Director at Rocky Mountain Development Council in Helena, Montana. We are a weatherization sub-grantee, and we serve 3 counties in the central Montana.
Awesome. So what are you here to talk with me today about?
So we're here to discuss energy analysis and a tool that we created at Rocky Mountain Development Council, and also baseload reduction strategies and client education, how we can make those inroads into helping people understand their impact on their own energy use and what strategies they can use to bring down their energy use.
Awesome. I've got a chance to check out that tool. It's an awesome tool. We're going to talk about that today. Tell us a little bit about where that tool came from and who it's designed for.
Sure. So the basis of that tool came from a couple of my mentors from my former life. Big shout out to Tamison Sterner, who sort of guided me in the importance of not only baseload education, but making a connection with the client and how important that can be on the overall project. And so we developed a tool that was simple to use, that could be used by the auditor before they go on site, but this can also be used by intake or eligibility specialists. It can be used in the administrative realm in terms of finding what's working in the program or what's not to look at real actualized savings. But mainly it was developed for an auditor before they go on site.
Yeah, excellent. And do you think this will be something that most people in weatherization should be able to use to kind of make their workflow more efficient?
Yes, it's very, very simple. It's
Awesome.
Few inputs, and it gives you a lot of information that will help you make the determination when you get on site. It can really save a lot of time and get to what you're there to do, which is to bring down the energy use and to help the client in doing that in the future.
And we call the goal of this the energy analysis, whether it's beforehand or afterhand. So that's kind of the main theme that we'll be talking about is how to analyze energy usage both in the house, but more importantly with this tool before we're coming into the house.
That's right. And it's really difficult to save energy when you don't understand where that energy is going.
Right.
So this tool, the Beast, will allow you to see what portion of their energy goes to base load and what goes to the heating or the cooling, and whether that's high, medium, or low, so that before we show up, we know whether or not we need to deal with base load, or it really just sort of guides where the low-hanging fruit are for that particular house.
And talk to me a little bit about base load. Oftentimes, at least in weatherization, we tend to be more concerned about the thermal shell, especially up here in the Rocky Mountain North, where we've got those cold winters.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the big deal about baseload? Why do we think we should maybe care more about baseload than might have been the trend in the past?
Sure. So baseload energy is defined as the energy that is used year-round, regardless of the temperature outside. So these are things like your television, your water heater, your refrigerator. You use them pretty much the same in January as you do in July. And so that energy usage, even in a cold climate where we are here, which is a zone 6 climate, ends up being about half of the energy use for a particular client. We go in to weatherize a home and we have, say, $7,000 of a budget to deal with the walls and the attic and add insulation and so forth. But we don't spend as much time or as much money on the base load, even though it's as big of a piece of that pie.
Yeah, and often that pie, would you say that it includes oftentimes some of the lower hanging fruits, some of the kind of one and done swap outs like the LED lights and
faucet
things like
aerators, things like that. So there's a lot of simple things like that are one and done and easy peasy, but there is a more complex part of base load in that it's very behavioral. What you're doing when you're doing client education is you need to help the client understand how their behaviors impact their utility bill. And that gets a lot more tricky than screwing in a new light bulb.
Absolutely.
But it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, and I think what we'll see with the Beast later on as Jonathan goes over how to use that tool is it's really a best practice for personalizing those energy usage. It's easy to go in your back pocket and pull out, national stats and say, on average, people use, this much electricity when you're educating a client, for example. But it's better, and I think, Jonathan, you'd agree with me here, that it's better when you can sit down with their energy bills, put them into a tool, get some graphic representation, and get something that's really personalized to the home that you're in. That's gonna hit the target, closest to the center when you do that.
Absolutely. I mean, it really kind of is a hybrid approach. We don't want to be in there asking the client how many minutes a day they use each light bulb in their home. If you could get all of that data and it were accurate, that'd be great. But the reality is you're not going to. So if we can use actual real-time utility data to get where their base load is, where their winter heating use is, and then we bring in the regional averages to pinpoint where we can bring those back. So it's sort of a best of both worlds. There really isn't a linear relationship between time spent on client education and the savings associated with that. Because if you think about it, we're going to go into homes and we might have someone that's trying to get kids down for a nap, and there's fish sticks in the oven, and the neighbor comes over and the phone rings, and it can be chaos. And so in order to make an impact, we have to be able to be flexible and concise. We can't spend 3 hours talking about every single thing that uses energy. We need to find the big ones, make a connection, and that will make the impact on the client's bills.
And what we'll see, kind of looking at this tool later, is even if you're going into the house to identify what the actual appliances are, just knowing what the baseload electric usage, whether it's on the high index for a home of a similar size or the low index, is a good indicator of where you can spend your time when you're with that client to have the best effect.
Absolutely. If you find a home that has very low baseload use and you're walking through there and there really aren't many opportunities for savings, you really don't need to talk about it. You need to focus your efforts on what will make an impact.
Absolutely.
And I've found that when you're educating clients, they're busy. They're not nerds like me that spend all day in the minutia of energy conservation.
Energy data.
Yeah, that's not our clientele. So we need to be able to boil it down into 2, 3, 4 ways that they can save energy.
Yeah.
And not talk about things that they would never notice on their energy bill, like unplugging a cell phone charger. You would have to have thousands of cell phone chargers plugged in to actually see a difference there. And you can contrast that with an electric water heater that has a 4,500 watt element compared to a 1 watt cell phone charger. It shows you that there's one of those we should talk about and one we shouldn't.
Definitely. Let's pause on the client part of that for a second and just talk about workplace efficiency. Just for context here, this is being recorded in June 2020, kind of amidst what's going on with COVID-19 here in the United States, and our regions all independently are dealing with this in different ways. We're talking a lot about maybe doing audits more remotely, or just being more cognizant about how much time we're spending in the workplace. How does using a tool like the Beast allow us to work more efficiently, whether it just be for business practice optimization or spending less time in the customer home and really getting as much done as we can on the back end before we're there in that environment, to make sure that we can still energy audit and still provide valuable feedback and project work without spending quite as much time at home.
Absolutely. So with the information that we're going to have before we get on site, we're going to know how they heat their home. We may know the size of the home, but if we have their utility data, before we show up, we can say, oh, okay, we have a mobile home with high winter heat use. And we can wrap our heads around, all right, we need to find where we can put insulation in. And, if you have a different home that's a high base load, that you need to pack a bunch of light bulbs, you need to do those things. So you can wrap your head around what the scope of the job is before you even get on site, as opposed to showing up blind and looking around for things and trying to conjecture what those things you saw, what their impact is on the energy use. We know ahead of time, and then we're filling in the pieces instead of flying blind.
Yeah, and I want to take a moment there to build on what you just said and kind of highlight and bring attention to that is when we are doing other audit practices, we're conjecturing what's going to happen with energy usage. We're predicting, we're looking at the walls, we're looking at the IR imagery, and we're saying we think and we estimate that this will happen. However, when we're looking at bill analysis, we're looking at recorded data of what actually happened. We're looking at the most real data that we're ever going to have for a home is going to come from that utility bill. And so if you've got a home that doesn't have, for example, high winter heat use, but has substantial electric base load, you might go in and still see qualities that would make you conjecture that insulating and heating are going to be your biggest bang for your buck, when really there's a lot of underlying things that you could do in the house. More cost effective potentially before you moved on to some of those other elements.
Sure, and another aspect is when you have this information about the house before you show up, maybe that helps you determine which auditor you want to send.
True.
If you have a high baseload house and you're really going to need to coach the client, maybe this auditor is better for that than the other one.
Awesome. Well, we're going to jump over. Jonathan's going to give us a quick analysis of what energy analysis is. He's going to quickly show us some of the main themes and topics. And then after that, we're going to go look at a hands-on application of using the BEAST tool. And when we come back, we'll talk about writing that into your work plan.
Today, Wyatt and I will be discussing energy analysis and baseload education and reduction strategies. I'll start with a short PowerPoint about energy analysis, and then we'll move into a tool that was developed at my agency that helps analyze energy and gives the auditor a lot more information before going into the home. So to start off, what is energy analysis? This is looking at a home's energy usage to learn more about how energy is used in that home. So we'll define it as the winter energy usage, the summer energy usage, and the baseload energy usage. Baseload being any energy that is used year-round, regardless of the temperature outside. So it includes refrigeration, water heating, lighting, etc. Energy analysis will allow us to highlight the problem areas in a home before the auditor ever arrives. And this saves time for the auditor because they will know where they need to focus their efforts, because our mission is to bring energy usage down. And this is the first step in understanding how a home uses energy, which is the first step in educating the client and how they can save energy. And the reason why we're going to do this is because it shows us what the low-hanging fruit is in a home. It saves time for the auditor. There will be fewer missed opportunities at the audit because the auditor has fewer things that they're required to do while on site. And this process is approachable not only for the auditor and inspector, but this can be used by intake and eligibility staff. It can be used by administrative staff to have a larger look at the program as a whole. And you're able to empower the clients into strategies that they can use to save energy. And again, this can be done by the auditor and the inspector, which is probably most common, but this can be done at the intake or eligibility stage to start the process to give the clients tips on how they can move forward with saving energy. And then lastly, it can be used as an administrative tool as well. The tool that I'll show you was developed to be done before an audit, but it can be used as a follow-up to look at the energy usage post-weatherization. And it can be used even outside of weatherization as a client education tool. And how this is done is we first define the sources of high use, and that'll show up as either baseload, cooling, or heating energy. And then we can look to averages that the Energy Information Administration does to show us what are the likely culprits of that high usage. And then we can match this to what we see in the house. And this will become a little bit more clear when we move through the tool. This is a snapshot of what the tool looks like. I realize this is probably a little bit small, so you probably can't see it, but it'll offer a bit of an overview. Now, you can see on the screen here, any field that's purple is an enterable field. Nothing else on here is changeable. Everything else is locked, so you don't have to worry about changing the formulas or anything like that. You go to your purple fields, you add your information, and it'll spit out this data. So what we need is 12 months of energy usage. We start by adding the first month and the usage down there, and then that will, once we add the square footage of the home and the heating degree days. So those are the inputs that we need to put in. We need the 12 months of energy usage, square footage of the home, and the heating degree days. And this allows us to get the energy usage of that home, but it's trued up for the climate, and it's also trued up for the size of the home. So from there, it gives us our data, and it will show us what the home heating index is, which shows us the total energy use for that climate, for that size home, which is just sort of an interesting metric. But then we will move into the base load consumption, the winter consumption, and the summer consumption. And it will spit out whether it's high, medium, or low with a color-coded green, yellow, or red. And we also have the graph here, and you'll see that there's the red line going across the graph, and that is showing us what our base load is. So everything below the red line is our base load, everything above it is going to be our seasonal usage. And this serves as a nice graphic to show our clients what it is we're actually talking about. I'm going to go through two more slides here that show the Energy Information Administration's data for the Rocky Mountain climate, which is our climate here in Montana, that also goes into Colorado, Wyoming. They have information for different regions, but this is specific to the Rocky Mountain North. And you can see, and this is based off of, hundreds, probably thousands of homes, that the green part here is our base load, and 49% of the average home in this region, energy use goes towards base load. 48% goes to heating, and a very small sliver goes to cooling. But this shows you that base load is an enormous opportunity for savings. And then when we drill down into base load to see where the majority of that use goes, again, this comes from the Energy Information Administration, you see this large 52% is the water heating. So this helps us tailor what we want to discuss with the client. We can focus on the things that will have the biggest impact on their energy use, which will help empower the client to take charge of their own energy use. So now we'll switch into actually using the tool. For the first one here, I will add the data live, and you can see that it only takes just a moment or two, and then we can make our assumptions from that. All right, so this is the Baseload and Energy Assessment Summary tool. You'll notice I had to look to see what the actual name of this is. Why did I choose that name? Because it has a sweet acronym. We know it as the BEAST. So here is the BEAST. This is a very simple tool. Again, our purple fields are enterable, nothing else is. So you can see that there are very few inputs that you actually need to do. I'm going to enter some data in here live, and then we'll be able to make our assumptions about the energy use for this client in real time. So we start off up here. Again, we need to put in our 12 months of usage here. So we'll just start with our first month here, which I have as June of 2020. And it changes all of our other months down to make it easy for us. And then we just add the usage for that month. Okay, so that's our actual usage of electric usage that we got from the utility for this client. And you can see it's already picking out what our total kilowatt hours for electric energy used is, what our base load is, and what our seasonal is. But to take this one step forward, we want to add the square footage and the heating degree days. I'm going to leave the heating degree days at 8167 because that's the 30-year average for my area. And 1200 here, we can just keep that as a general size of the home. And what the tool has done now is it has given us our home heating index, which is a metric of total energy use that is trued up for the size of the home and the climate. It's given us our annual baseload consumption for electric, which we see as 11,244. You'll notice that this populated as red, which means that it's high usage. Over here we have our seasonal usage, which is 3,270, and that's been populated as green, so we know that that's low. Our summer seasonal usage is red at 2,727, and that's in the high range. So already we know sort of that our base load is going to be a topic that we want to discuss. Now, this client also has gas usage. So to enter the gas usage, we come to the gas tab, and we do the same thing as we did before. And we add the data that we have from the utility. Okay, so now we have our gas usage entered. You'll see that the square footage and the heating degree days are grayed out now. They're no longer purple. Those are only editable on the electric page, but they're not going to change in the different fuel types. So those are no longer enterable. And you can see here that our base load consumption for gas is very, very low, which we can infer that they have not a lot of gas appliances contributing to base load, which leads us to believe that perhaps they don't have a gas dryer or a gas water heater. But you can see that we do have high gas use for the heating. So that tells us what we kind of want to focus our efforts on. We know we want to look for opportunities for air sealing and insulation based on the high gas use for the winter. And when we go back to the electric page, we know that we want to consider base load measures and education to bring this down. And we also have some significant summer cooling usage, which would also be impacted by our air sealing and insulation measures. Now we have other fuels down here that you can add. There's propane, fuel oil, and wood. Now, when we get away from metered energy sources, things get a little bit more difficult. When we don't have the printout from the utilities saying exactly how many kilowatt hours, we have to ask the client and do it as best we can. We do have inputs for softwood, hardwood, and pellets. And for fuel oil and propane, if you do have a statement from the utility, that would be helpful. Usually we just have to ask the clients how many gallons. So that's the tricky part about doing non-metered fuels. We do have an avenue to do that, but it's never as easy as the metered fuels. So this gives us the general breakdown of how energy is used in this home. In this home, we have significant base load that we want to tackle, and we have seasonal opportunities as well. And when you're presenting this to a client, it's helpful for them to see, where their base load is visually, but that's not going to mean a lot to the client. So we have these charts here, and these go through for the Rocky Mountain North area as defined by the Energy Information Administration, where energy use typically goes based on their surveys. So when we look at total site energy for my area, you can see that about half goes to base load and half goes to heating. And in this case that we're looking at here, we do have high base load. So that's a conversation we want to have with the client. And hopefully the client's follow-up question is, well, what's base load? And then we can go to this one and see that water heating is the biggest portion of that. So our job is to motivate the client and empower the client for them to take hold of their own energy use. And in order for them to do that, they need to know where their behaviors are going to make a difference. So when they can see that if they want to tackle that high base load, and they can come here and see that, well, water heating is the place to start, that's what can open the conversation. It's best to tailor your tips to save energy based on actual usage in the home. And my assumption is if you were to talk to this client about their water heating use, they may say, oh, I have teenagers, hear it all the time, and they take 25-minute showers 4 times a day. Well, that's what starts the conversation into how they can reduce their energy use through the water heater, now that they can see and understand that that's a big contributor to their energy use. One other point that I like to make with clients is that when we look at the total site consumption here, the weatherization crew is going to come in and they're going to focus mostly on the space heating. They're going to be looking for opportunities to air seal. They're going to be looking for opportunities to add insulation, perhaps a furnace upgrade. Those are things that the client doesn't really need to interact with. The home becomes more efficient, so this usage will go down. However, base load is highly behavioral, and that's where it becomes so important to make a connection with the client so that they feel empowered that they can make a difference through behavior change. And that's where energy education really comes in.
All right, Jonathan, thank you for that awesome tour. Real quick, just describe to me how this tool can be modified to work in different regions, outside the Rocky Mountain North, for example.
Sure. So we use data from the Energy Information Administration for our region. Now, there are links in the tool that will take you to that part of the EIA website that can give you those statistics for other regions, and then they can just be plugged into that part of the tool.
Awesome.
So it can be manipulated. There's also someone I know in Minnesota who they use CCF. They don't use therms. So we did make a modification for her so that it would work for her. So you might have some tweaks like that, but I do have an unlocked version that's available for people if you do want to tweak it for your region.
Yep. If you're interested in that, go ahead and send an email to classes@weatherization.org. We'll do our best to track that down and get a copy of it for you. So let's think about this house we just looked at in the Beast, and let's walk through the process of taking this to the job site. Just start me out. Give me some of the tips on talking to clients. Like once you get your results back from the Beast, how do you bring it up? How do you sit down and have those conversations with your clients?
Sure. So it all kind of starts with where their energy use goes. Their base load is high, medium, or low. Their winter use is high, medium, or low. Their summer use is high, medium, or low. And from there, we can guide that conversation. So in the one that we looked at, the base load, the electric base load was very high. The gas base load was very, very low. So that tells us, that as far as the fuel of gas, we're looking at shell measures. But for electric, for that fuel, we're looking at a lot of base load things. Yeah. And there was also the cooling part in there. So once we know that the base load is high, then we can go over to that chart and figure out, well, what makes up base load? And water heating is half of that. So that's what we want to start with. If that's going to be the biggest impact, that's where we got to start. So then we go into coaching the client on, taking shorter showers. The auditor or the weatherization tech will probably put on some aerators and things like that. But really, it's going to be to educate them on, what their behavior is and what the impact of that behavior is on their energy use.
Absolutely. So you'd say it's safe. You're kind of looking at this. In my head, I'm going, okay, this house probably has an electric water heater. First of all, that's something I'm probably thinking looking at this spreadsheet. But I probably want to ask the homeowner that question, right? That's what other questions would you want to ask the homeowner here?
Sure. So, so again, we are talking about humans and their behavior. So knowing, how many people live in the home, there could be, medical things that are contributing to the base load. But if they have 3 teenagers and we have high base load, we want to talk about the water heater. We want to talk about the duration of shower times. So we're using their actual data to talk about how they can save.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you take that and stop there, or are you going to bring some of this information, for example, to your auditor If I was an energy auditor on, say, a program that you were manager for, and you came to me and had done analysis on a house, you're teaching me how to use this tool. We look at this house, and how are you going to advise me to maybe change how I do my audit or how I start drafting my work plans based off what I already know from looking at the beast here?
Sure. So, I mean, the first thing that I would discuss with my auditor is, before we even get into any of the analysis of their energy use, we need to make a connection with the client. And there are certain ways to do that, but no one wants to be lectured. No one wants to feel like, oh, some dude came into my house and they were a jerk and I was glad when they were gone. Yeah. That's just not going to work. Mm-hmm. So we do need to engage with the client. We do need to make a connection with them. Otherwise, none of this, that's the cornerstone of what we're doing. And then from there, once we know what the problem areas are, so in this case, we have a high electric base load and high gas winter use are the two things that we're going to be focusing on. So then we sort of for the base load, we look to that chart and we start with the biggest one, water heater, and then we work backwards. And, maybe in that particular house, when the auditor's there, they find that the water heater, is fine, that they only shower at the gym or, whatever. Well, then we go back and look for the other things. And, there are a number of things that can contribute to things that look like high base load. For instance, in some climates, if they have a heat pump, that, since it goes directly from cooling into heating and vice versa, that could look like high base load.
Yeah.
Or a dehumidifier, things like that. So, this doesn't eliminate actually having to do the audit. We still need to think our way through, but it lets us know what we're looking for.
Absolutely. And, I want to highlight again, as we've talked about, this is real data. This is that historical usage. So whether it's about making our audits more efficient or making our work more efficient that we do in a house, it's also about making our work more accurate, because we're prescribing measures with both realities of what we saw on the job site, but also realities of what history can tell us about a particular house and about a client.
Mm-hmm. And since it is real data, when we look at that graph, we might see that the December, there's a huge spike in there, but their base load is pretty low elsewhere, and maybe we need to talk to them about Christmas lights. Yeah. Or when Cousin Eddie came and, plugged in for a month.
Yeah.
So that there's things like that where we might see a spike and we can start the conversation. What happened in March?
Yeah. And so, we do this, to help educate the client, because after all, this work it's about people. It's not about kilowatt hours or therms. Mm-hmm. Those are definitely a part of it, but they shouldn't be the central focus to all the work we do, right? The human beings, the occupants, their comfort, their safety, and ultimately their energy bills are why weatherization is here to do what it does.
That's exactly right. I can save you all the energy in the world. It's really very easy. I can turn off the breaker and I can shut off the gas, and bam, we have a very efficient house.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable and it's dark and it's not a great place to live. So that's the balance.
Totally.
It's the people that live in that home that are using the energy. The house doesn't really use energy. Mm-hmm. That's a function of the people. And that's where this comes in, is we have to engage with the people, because they are the people that are going to continue to save that energy if we made the connection. That's an investment that goes forward for as long as they live in that home. And it's worth doing.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Jonathan Ballou, and joining me is Tara Andrews from Montana State University, and we're going to be looking through her actual energy usage. We're going to plug it into the beast and see what we can actually figure out. So thanks so much for joining us, Tara. Would you mind telling us just a quick bit about yourself?
I'm Tara Andrews. I'm an MSU Extension agent in Custer County, Miles City.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time today, Tara. Hopefully we'll be able to look at your energy usage and figure out some ways where you'd be able to save some energy. Now, typically this part of the energy assessment is done by the auditor when they first show up to the home, and where they can
make an assessment about where the energy use is going and ask the client some questions to really wrap their head around the project. Now, of course, in this COVID-19 world, this may be part of a pre-assessment. And so this can stand in as a version of how a pre-assessment could be done, whether it's over a virtual platform like Zoom or Teams or something like that, or just over the phone. So Wyatt, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the beast, and we can start looking at Terra's energy usage. All right, so what we have here is this is Terra's energy usage. Right now we're looking at her electric usage. And Wyatt has filled in all of our purple fields. Again, the purple fields are what you can enter. Everything else is locked. So we have the kilowatt hours per month. We have the square footage, the heating degree days, and what we want to define the winter and summer seasons as. Now, as we look at this electric usage, on the graph, we can see the red line coming through, and that denotes Terra's base load energy use. So everything below the red line is constant throughout the year. It doesn't change that much between the summer or the winter months. And again, that's your lighting, your refrigerator, water heating, laundry, entertainment devices, everything other than how you condition the temperature of your home, that being the heat or the air conditioning. And as we look through some of our fields here, the home heating index is 5.8, and that's in the green range. So it looks like the overall energy footprint of the home is in pretty good shape. So that's a good thing. That tells us that that we're not, at least at the beginning of this assessment, overly concerned with energy waste. As we move to the right, we're looking at the annual base load consumption, and we're in the medium range, but just barely. So it's at the very low end of the medium range. So really, that's pretty good. When we look over to the winter seasonal usage for electric, we have 831, and that tells me that that's probably the furnace fan that's contributing to that. My assumption in looking at this is that there is no or very, very little electric heat in the building. For the cooling usage, we have 747, which is in the low range as well. And that also tells me that the cooling load in this building is very low. I'm assuming that the building may be well shaded, that fans are used to keep the clients cool, but that air conditioning is at a minimum based on the amount of energy used. Wyatt, if you wouldn't mind clicking over to the gas page, we can see how that works. Now in Terra's home, we have gas and electric. Those are our two fuel sources. If there were some propane or fuel oil or wood or pellets, we would see those on the other tabs down below, but this home is just electric and gas. So as we look through this page, we're noticing that we have all of our inputs in there, and we have our base load line. And if you look at our red line, it's very low. It's close to the bottom. And that tells us that the appliances that make up the base load don't really appear to be, many of them gas, and the ones that are look to be used pretty efficiently. So you'll notice here that our home heating index stayed the same. That will be constant through all the tabs on this page. And we have that low home heating index, which is good. The overall energy footprint of this home is in the low range, and that's good. The annual baseload consumption for gas is 102 therms, and that's in the low range as well. When we look over to the winter seasonal use, we have 500 therms, which is in the high range, but the overall energy consumption is still pretty good. But this does tell us that maybe we need to be looking for air sealing and insulation opportunities. What I'm able to extrapolate from these two pages of this tool is that the base load use for this home is really pretty low and not probably where we want to focus a ton of our effort. However, the seasonal usage, it looks like there are some opportunities for saving. So now that we've looked through where the energy usage is going for electric and base load, the follow-up question that a client might ask is, well, where does that usage go? So Wyatt, if you wouldn't mind going over to the base load charts, we can review that real quick. So the pie graph on the left, that is based on energy averages compiled for our region. And again, you can see that for our region, the Zone 6 climate, we are looking at about 50-50 split between space heating and baseload, and very little going towards cooling. Now, the space heating was the issue that we saw that we do want to address. But it is, even with low baseload, it's always good to help the client understand where that baseload use is going and encourage them in what they are doing already that is good, which clearly we can see that from the graphs, and let them know that what is being used, even though it's low, where that usually will end up. So if we go over to the right, we can see that the vast majority of baseload energy use, that big orange chunk there, that's water heating. So that's the low-hanging fruit when it comes to baseload. Now, again, with this particular house, it's not a huge concern. So this is the information that we can extrapolate with just the utility data. But from there, then we want to talk to the client and find out a little bit more. We want to confirm our suspicions and find out more about the home. So we'll bring Tara into the conversation, and I'll just go through a few of these questions with Tara so that we can find out a little bit more about the home and try and figure out if some of our assumptions are correct. So Tara, can you tell me how long you've lived in your home?
30 years.
30 years. All right. So we've been there for a bit, so you know the ins and outs of it. There's not too many surprises left for you to discover. All right. And can you tell me how many people live in the home?
2 adults and 2 dogs.
2 adults and 2 dogs. All right.
Yeah.
And as far as a heating system, it looks to be gas. Is that correct? Is it a gas furnace?
A gas furnace, and then we have a gas stove similar to a wood stove in the basement.
Okay. Do you happen to know how old the furnace is?
About 10 years, 8 to 10 years old.
Okay. And do you happen to know the last time that the furnace was serviced by an HVAC technician?
Oh, it's been a while, probably 3 years.
Okay. All right. And do you regularly change the furnace filter in that furnace?
I actually have a washable one, so I wash it every month.
Okay.
Or
Okay. So every month, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, just a tip for those out there listening. The way that I remember to check my furnace filter at my home is when my utility bill comes. It comes every month. You can rely on your utility to get that bill out every month. So that's a good reminder. When your utility bill comes, check the filter. If it's dirty, replace it or wash it. If not, check it again next month. Now, Tara, can you tell me, are there parts of the home that are too hot or too cold that are difficult at different times of the year to keep comfortable?
You know, I think that the back 2 rooms tend to be a little colder. They were originally bedrooms. Now one's a den and one's a sewing room, and they tend to be a little colder. They're farther from the furnace than the kitchen and living room and main bedroom. So they are a little cooler in the winter.
Okay. Is it, are they so cold that they're sort of, you can't inhabit them, or that they require an electric space heater?
No, it just requires a sweater.
Sure, a sweater and slippers. Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. Do you know, are there parts of your home that you find are drafty?
No, our windows we've put in new windows in the last 10 years. So,
Okay.
the doors tend to be draftier. We've put on new sweeps at the bottom, but if it's really
Okay,
cold
sure.
out, I tend to roll a towel and put it at the bottom of the door.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. And are there any medical issues? You don't have to go into any sort of detail, but as it applies to your energy use, it's something that we ask, and feel free not to answer in this setting, but something to think about. If there are medical devices that do contribute to the energy use, that would be something that the auditor may ask to find out more about. Feel free to not answer that in this setting, though. Do you notice any moisture issues in the home? Any mold, mildew, any condensation on the windows, any musty smells?
No, really none. In the winter
Good.
when it's really cold, if I'm cooking a lot, there'll be some condensation on kitchen windows, but other than that, no.
Okay, but pretty localized, and you can tie it to the cooking of pasta.
Right, exactly.
Okay. That's good to know. All right, so this is just sort of a short sampling of the types of questions that an auditor would ask to find out more. And what's pretty clear to me is that behaviorally, that the way that your behavior and the behavior of the other occupant of the home is not contributing to high energy use. So that's a really good thing, and that would be what we were trying to tackle in this type of a setting. If I saw very high base load, I would be more concerned with walking you through how your actions affect that base load. But in this case, you made it a little bit easy for me, and we don't need to spend too much time on that. And so the auditor with this information knows that the client's behavior is not a large contributor to the energy use, that the base load use is not a big contributor. So the auditor, in your case, Tara, would be looking at ways they can seal up the home, anywhere where insulation could be added, and perhaps bulking up the ventilation in the kitchen. So those are sort of the things that we can extrapolate from a conversation with a client, with looking at the utility bills. We could take it a step further and get some Google Earth or Street View images of the home to wrap our heads around it. But a lot of this work can be done from the safety of your office. And the first step in bringing the energy use down, in my opinion, is to deal with the clients. Now, of course, Tara's home itself won't use really any energy. It all comes down to the occupants. So educating the occupants as to how their behavior affects the energy use is very, very important. Now, Tara, do you have any questions about your energy use? Are there any things that you have concerns of, or maybe the things where you're concerned that might be the main contributor to your energy bills?
I don't think so. I do have one question about the height of the insulation in the attic.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's not an attic that you can actually use. It's just, but you can get up there.
Right. It's just a hatch, and there's some insulation in there.
Right. And right now it's fiberglass.
Okay.
But it was put up there at a time when I think it was recommended a lesser amount of insulation than now is recommended.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's really common. If your home was built to the code standards from, say the 80s or 90s, code would have said, perhaps R38 was the R value that we were looking for. As things change over time, now we're looking for R49 is the code minimum. So even though the energy use is not extraordinary for your home. If your home came up for weatherization, we would still be looking to see what benefit we could make for you. So it could be that adding a bit more insulation, or most likely air sealing the attic floor would be of benefit, and maybe some other air sealing opportunities. So those would be the things that we would look at once we physically got on site. You know, those are the things that get a little bit tricky to do in a remote setting, but it gives the auditor information as to what your concerns are and how the auditor may be able to address those things. So getting up into the attic is always something that an auditor will do in every situation.
Right.
Yeah. The main concern that you have is whether you have enough insulation up in the attic.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That would
Sure.
Because we have a fan at the end of the eaves that turns on, is temperature controlled. So when it starts getting hot out, it turns on. And then we also have an all house fan in the hallway. So once it cools off at night, we turn that on. And like I looked at the thermometer, we closed up the house, and so it was still 66 degrees in here at 11 when I got on this call with no air.
Yeah,
and it's 80 some already outside.
Sure, and that's why you have a sweater on. Yeah, I had the same thing in my house this morning. Well,
yeah, I have slippers on too, so.
That's great. Yeah, so that's actually fantastic, Tara. So you brought up two types of attic ventilation, all right? And one of them is a great option, and the other is not. And we'll just talk about that real quick, because these are the types of things that we learn once we actually start talking to the client. Now, the whole house fan that's in the hallway that exhausts air from the house into the attic, that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
We like those, especially in this climate where it's much drier. You can use that to your heart's content. It's a great way to cool the house off. Now, the fan that's in the attic that exhausts attic air from the attic to the outside, those are not effective. And we find, or well, I should say, in most cases are not effective. And what we find is that those can actually have an energy penalty, because in some cases that fan can be strong enough to suck air from the house into the attic, which, you know, some of that cooler air from the house would be drawn into the attic, which we don't want. The attic in the summer is going to be hot. It'll always be hot. There's nothing we need to do about that. It's just fine. You know, the way that we combat that is to air seal the attic floor and to have enough insulation in there, like we talked about. But once you get above that level of insulation, that attic is going to be 110, 130 degrees. That's just the way it goes, and that's okay. We don't need to try and exhaust that air because the insulation is doing the work for us. But the whole house fan that can help exhaust that warm air at the top of the house and replace it with cool air, those are an effective cooling strategy, in particular in a drier climate like this.
Right. And then we do put an insulation blanket over it in the winter time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that we're not leaking heat out of the house into the attic.
Yes, that's exactly the right way. Now, for all the benefits that can offer in the summer, unfortunately, those could be offset in the winter if it is allowed to leak air. So we want to make sure that that's very, very tight in the summertime. The attic floor, the top plane of our homes, is a very, very important thing. And what we do in weatherization is work to make that as tight as possible so that we don't have air from our house that we have paid to cool or paid to heat getting up into our attic. So, so the whole house fan is a potential bypass. It's a potential air leak. So we would want to make sure that that's sealed up tight, but it is a great way and much more cost effective than using an air conditioner to cool off the house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other concerns that you have with your home? It sounds like we're not looking at moisture issues or roof leaks or things like that. That's always good. those
No.
can complicate things, and they can be a big contributor to base load. It's not uncommon, and certainly in different parts of the country, for clients to run a dehumidifier in the basement all through the summer, which has a big energy penalty.
No, we don't
All
have,
right.
and we just had a new roof put on 2 years ago because of hail.
Okay. Sure, and that's helpful. So Tara, I think what we'll want to do lastly before we close out this interview is maybe we can have Wyatt bring the energy assessment back up, the BEAST spreadsheet back up, and we can look at that together, and you can tell me what you think of that. So Wyatt, if you wouldn't mind going over to the electric page. And as we talked earlier, Tara, about base load and winter use and summer use, does that make sense? Have I explained that in a way that's clear, that base load use is somewhat of a constant all throughout the year, doesn't really change? Does that make sense? And does the amount that's listed there, does that sort of make sense to you?
Yes, completely.
Okay, that's good. It's one of these ways that we can kind of break things down to make it a little bit more manageable. So, and I think, in my opinion, it always helps to see things visually. So we have the base load at the bottom end of the medium range. I have no concerns about that. That's okay, especially, you know, in a full size single family home. I'm pleased with that. And then we also have, you know, the electric portion of the winter use, which is 830, which, you know, by and large is going to be the furnace fan, to be honest with you. It's a pretty big fan that moves the heat through. So am I correct in my assumption that you don't use any electric space heaters?
No, we don't.
Okay, excellent. And then Wyatt, if you wouldn't mind going to the gas page. All right, and so the base load consumption for the gas was in the low range. So my assumption there is that the water heater is gas, but that you are pretty judicious about taking short showers.
Yes, I grew up on a well that went dry numerous times, and so we with a big family, so we were
okay. Right. So it's pretty well ingrained.
Extremely short. Yes, I can't stand to hear water run without getting nervous.
Good for you. Thank you. I love
gas stove too. A gas cook.
Okay, sure. And so what I'm seeing with, again, the water heater is a significant contributor to the base load, but with our base load consumption in the green and the low mark, I have no concerns about your hot water usage or your cooking habits. This is good news. And I think it does go to show that you are able to extrapolate some pretty important information from just the utility bills. And then, you know, with the winter seasonal use in the high range, again, that's going to be pretty typical for a home. You know, you've lived there for 30 years, and if it was new when you lived there or older, you know, that's pretty typical for a home of that vintage. And those are certainly all the things that we're very well prepared to tackle with insulation and air sealing and so forth. So does the gas usage here, does that sort of meet your expectations? Do you have any questions about that?
It has. My husband's retired, so it has gone up with somebody else, because before that,
sure,
you know, automatic thermostat that would go down during the day, and now that heat is on all day long in the winter. So
right. So okay, so we're seeing some of that usage from your husband keeping the home fires burning during the day.
Yeah.
All right. So Wyatt, I think lastly, let's look at the base load charts again. And maybe we can dig in to the actual base load. Yep, that one there. Now, Tara, tell me what you think when you see this. is this about what you would expect for your base load? Is that where you would think it would go, or did you think that perhaps there were other larger contributors to your energy use?
I guess I'm surprised at lighting because we, have all high efficiency light bulbs and that kind of thing. So I'm kind of surprised that it's 13%.
Oh, okay. So one important thing, Tara, is these two charts. These are based on data that was collected by the Energy Information Administration. So these are typically what we see for our region. Yeah, so the first two pages, your electric and gas, that was your specific usage. These are averages here.
Okay.
So in your home, that's a good point though. And oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I see now that the 52% is the water heating.
Yes. So that's our big chunk for lighting. We have 13% on average, but if you have all high efficiency light bulbs in there, all LEDs, then that's going to be cut down significantly, more than likely. But really, what we like for this is, it's very, very common for people to ask me, well, how much energy does my cell phone charger use? And when we look at this, you'll see that it doesn't have a category of its own. It would just fall into other. And the short answer to that question is, well, it uses next to no energy. But when we can see it visually, and if I were to tell a client that they had high base load, and then we look over here and we can see, well, if you're interested in bringing down that base load, let's talk about the water heater. And then if they do have a question about, well, what about my clothes dryer or my dishwasher, then we can reference it there and go from there. But it serves to visually allow the client to understand the impact of different appliances on their baseload use.
Right.
And this is a section that can offer some surprises for people. Water heating tends to be one of those things we take for granted. It's always supposed to be there. There's always a hot shower, and we've grown very accustomed to that. And we don't really tend to think of the hot water as an energy use. We tend to think of water use as a whole, but the energy that goes into water heating is significant. As you can see, it's a large portion of the overall energy, and it's the majority of the baseload energy. So Tara, do you have any follow-up questions about your energy usage or any strategies that you could use to bring down your energy usage at this point?
I think probably more insulation in the attic is something that we should look at. And we've also talked about in Europe and Japan, they have water heating that's just automatic. So it's attached to the water supply, like let's say under your kitchen sink. So you're not always heating up 55 gallons of hot water.
Sure.
So
yeah, so there are a number of different water heating solutions, tankless or point of source, which is what you're referencing there. Right. And so there are some potential options to bring that down. The standard tank water heater really is pretty archaic technology. It's been around forever, and there've been sort of minimal improvements that have been made to them. So there is some potential there. But as we're looking at the whole story here, we do know that your baseload energy is low. So if there were an improvement that you wanted to make to your home based on efficiency, based on what we can see with your data, it would probably make sense to focus on something that's going to bring down the heating use. So air sealing and insulation based on where your data is. So that's one of the benefits here is we can pinpoint where we can find the biggest effect. So that's pretty much what it comes down to. And I suppose at this point, I'd just like to thank you, Tara, for sharing your energy use with us and taking the time to meet with us today. I hope that this was informative for you, and I hope that it will be for our viewers that check this out at our Energy Out West virtual conference coming up in a few weeks.
It was very helpful and interesting, so thank you all.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Tara. Have a great day. And thank you, Wyatt, for putting this all together.
So I'm back. Jonathan, thanks for doing that interview with Tara. We sure learned a lot. I took some notes on my own. I'm just going to quickly summarize the audio notes that I took in this interview. Jonathan, you can just kind of check me as I go. So coming out of this conversation, I learned that, Tara's got high winter gas usage. So immediately I'm thinking shell measures and air sealing. So insulation, looking for air leaks. I'm going to maybe tune her heating system. I'm going to go take a look and just make sure that it's operating efficiently. We're assuming it's fairly new. She said she's had it for about 10 years. So I guess I'm sure it's maybe an 80% efficient furnace, somewhere in that kind of range. We could get more information when we got there. She also mentioned that there's some drafting through the doorways. So on my priority list here, I've got weather stripping doors, doing a few zone pressure diagnostics to see where airflow might be coming from that's creating some of that drafting. She also mentioned some specific rooms that are colder than others. I'm going to especially put emphasis on my pressure diagnostics in those areas. Probably bust out an IR cam if the conditions are right and look for gaps in the insulation or visible airflow in those particular rooms. I'm going to look for insulation. Oh, go ahead.
So I just want to we kind of came to an interesting point there where the client was saying that the doors are drafty. And, we know from a building science point of view that, that's probably more than likely not contributing all that much to the energy use. However, it is a client concern. And if we are able to seal those up and the client does feel a benefit from that, that goes a long way into building the rapport with the client. Then we moved on to the infrared camera and zone pressure diagnostics and, the things that we know are going to make the difference. But sometimes it makes sense to throw the client a bone and seal up that door, knowing that it's for them. It's going to make them feel better about things.
Absolutely, yeah. Very important, that client-centric. That's our whole theme today, Jonathan, right? Is this client-centric approach.
Absolutely.
To continue our work. So I also, and I'm going to emphasize here, with a lot of the stuff I'm saying, I'm emphasizing this Tara mentioned part. So, Tara mentioned too that there's a retired occupant now living in the home. So I know that me trying to set back the thermostat and make adjustments to the control or behavior mechanisms of the heating system isn't really my target area here, because I've got an occupant there who potentially wants it a little bit warmer for their comfort and safety. So, I'm going to prioritize then shell measures, heating efficiency, and air sealing.
And that's another important thing too. We didn't ask when Tara's husband retired and when it was that her husband started staying at home. So that's something to consider if we're going to look at the client's usage and then go back and analyze that to see what savings we had. Well, we might be seeing some of the husband being at home more as an increase in energy, potentially after weatherization. So it's important to be aware of that when that change in occupancy happened, because it will have a big effect.
Yeah. Tara also mentioned lower airflow in the kitchen area, especially when cooking pasta. So cleaning and tuning that fan or replacing that fan if we determine it's not satisfactory. I'm also going to want to look at that ductwork and make sure that that fan is properly venting to the outside. Bust out one of my fan flow hoods and definitely test that fan. It didn't seem like bathrooms were an issue, so if I am really time limited or I'm trying to minimize my exposure in the house, I might not be so focused on the bathroom fans, but it looks like here I have an opportunity to focus on that kitchen fan, so I want to address that. And Tara did have a few questions. She was curious about insulation in her attic. We can kind of speculate here that it's likely an R38 attic based on when those insulation measures were done. So air sealing that attic really nice and tight and maybe bringing it up to R49 could probably be one of our best plan of actions to address that high winter seasonal usage.
Yeah, of course, it may be difficult to get that attic to add that R10 or R15 to pay back. But it's one of those things. So you might be looking at other sources of funding or a client contribution or something like that. The air sealing, hopefully your state program will allow to take care of that, because that's going to be real effective.
Yeah, and here's another part of our conversation where we can kind of hone in on that conversation about air sealing in the attic. We did talk, Tara told us that she does have an attic exhaust fan, and you brought up that, that's maybe not the best way because we could be pulling conditioned air from our home up into our attic in the summers. So air sealing that attic is kind of both, we know now that it's probably a summer and a winter benefit in that home if that attic exhaust fan's running. And we might design a ventilation plan for that house that doesn't rely on that attic ventilation and switch to really just closing off the attic from the house, letting our attic be hot in the summers because now we know that it's well air sealed and well insulated, so we don't have to risk bringing out our cool conditioned air in the summer to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to look at the scope of this potential job at this point, because the way that I see it in my mind is the work scope is halfway drawn. We need to take some measurements, but we're not too far off from being able to write up this audit as complete. There's been a lot of information that we got, and we've started our interaction with the client. So this is a good step. This is a good step forward. We have quite a bit of information to move with.
Yeah, and whether that be because we're trying to minimize exposure in a house due to safety concerns, especially, this is August 2019 when this will be airing at EOW. We're still kind of in the heart of the COVID crisis. And so if we're trying to minimize time at home, I think this is an effective tool. But just generally in workplace efficiency, I think we can do better work knowing this stuff going in ahead of time. If we have this conversation, you and I as auditors or crew leader to auditor conversation right here, we've learned a lot about this home that's going to let us do better, more efficient work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jonathan, thank you so much for interviewing Tara. I'm going to bounce back to the rest of our interview now. And thanks everyone for watching.
Absolutely. Thanks, Wyatt. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
It's worth doing.
So let's step back and talk about the culture of how we do work in homes and how we advance our work processes. We often change what kind of products we're using, but how often do we evaluate the way in which we come to a job site, how we host those conversations, how we organize and process information? Where does that fit into how we should be thinking about weatherization work, but also just home performance work in general?
Yeah, and I think that's the most difficult part. It's pretty easy, to go through the SWS and say, well, we need to do it this way and so on and so forth. And sure, all buildings are different, but they're built in very similar ways. And so it's pretty applicable to figure out how air sealing this rim joist will compare to air sealing that rim joist. However, the occupant of that home compared to the occupant of that home, they could be completely different. And you might need to employ completely different strategies to make that connection with them. But it's incredibly important. In my opinion, it's probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a study a long time ago that had to deal with doctors and malpractice suits. And the bottom line was the doctors that made the connection with their patients, that spent the time and answered questions, well, they got sued less. Yeah. And I think the same thing is true here. If we make that connection, if we help them to understand how they can have an impact on their energy use, and we help our clients understand what we are going to do, we might eliminate that call 4 months later where someone pulled the ASHRAE fan out of the wall because it was annoying them.
Yeah.
We've all had that call.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really cool concept here, because when we're talking about this, we're one of the work that we're doing, we're giving people kind of more power over their energy control in their house. We're taking something that used to be a high number on a monthly bill that was completely out of the mind or the control of what people could do in their own homes. And in weatherization, we're trying to bring those numbers down, but we're also trying to give control of a person's home back to them. We're trying to instill some of that ownership, and we do that best when we connect with the customer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if we are in there and we give them a list of tips and then they get their next bill and they don't see a difference, the difference? Well, we're just some other Goonie bird that came in and tried to make a difference, but we missed the opportunity. And, the weatherization rules are going to say, well, we don't go back to that house,
Right.
or at least for a certain amount of time. That's a blown opportunity.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we can afford to do that.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, this is how we get into other homes. People talk, neighborhoods talk, communities talk. Having a positive experience with your weatherization tech is critical for, when you call another house and, start talking about the energy auditing process, the last thing you want to hear is, oh, well, someone I know had an awful experience with you doing this. So making that connection with the customers is also a super important way to just advance the goals of weatherization in general.
Absolutely. Happy clients are the best outreach tool there is, by far.
So Jonathan, thank you again for coming. Thank you for doing this interview.
Absolutely.
Thank you for helping create the Beast. I think it's a wonderful tool. I've been able to get my hands on it and poke around and play with it. I was really impressed with its ability to clearly synthesize information, especially in graphical form. People love pictures. I love pictures. I would way rather look at pictures than a bunch of numbers on a bill.
Absolutely.
I love that this tool I can populate it with and then get those really helpful, useful graphics. Any closing statements you want to have before we close up today?
Yeah, I think I just want to once again just get across that connecting with the client is one of the most important things that you will do on a weatherization job. It's worth spending the time to develop those skills for a lot of different reasons. We've covered a lot of them here today. But I think that you will find that there are a number of benefits to doing that. So take the time to do it and think it through. One tip that I would have in making connections is to always, and I realize this is hard, I struggled with it too, learn the names of all the kids and all the pets. If you do that alone, you will make that connection and you will make a difference. You have to remember that you're going into people's homes, they raise their kids there. It's a sacred place, so take it seriously.
Absolutely. Thanks again for watching. You can find a download to the Beast on weatherization.org. That's our website here at the Montana Weatherization Training Center. Feel free to check out that website. My contact information's there. You can also browse it. We've got plenty of weatherization and home performance content as well. Thanks again for watching.
Thanks.
With any sort of digital tool, we know that convenience is key. That's why we're making the Beast even easier to use. To start, we're excited to announce that we're bringing the Rocky Mountain North edition of the Beast to iOS and Android. This mobile version will feature all the same features as the desktop spreadsheet, starting by selecting the month of your most recent bill and entering data backwards to get a full year's worth of information. It can generate all the same calculations like annual total, seasonal, base load, summer and winter seasonals, as well as show you the charts to show how this house and these users compare to others in their region. Generates a nice graphic right in the app that demonstrates both base load and usage month by month that you can share with your clients to open better dialogue about their energy usage. You can also enter your valuable comments, notes, and feedback right into the comments section on the app. When you're done, you can save by hitting the print button, or you can either print out a copy to distribute to your clients, or you can save to a file on your local device so you have future access to that customer's information. The mobile version contains controls for gas, electric, propane, fuel oil, and wood, as well as the EIA baseload charts so you can help understand better where specifically are the majority of users using their energy in their baseload. We hope that this app is easy to use and that you can connect with your clients better and help your workplace become more efficient. Thanks for watching.